Okay, we are now live. We jump in the topic straight away. Bismillah, alhamdulillahi, rabbil alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome back to the Muslim Morning Podcast. I'm your host Ismail Howell, and once again we're with our Sheikh Mario Taqa. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. How you doing?
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me today, brother.
It's our pleasure,
Alhamdulillah.
mashallah. Okay, we have another very important topic. Um, why does God make it obligatory to follow the prophets? Now, obviously, the preceding conversation or podcast was to do with worship. So we have some people today who say, well, okay, I believe in God, but I don't want to follow, what do they call it again? Like formative religions or organized religion, or I want to get to God my way, or these organized religions, either they're involved in wars, or they've got issues with pedophilia concerning the Catholics, or you can't become a Jew. There seems to be a lot of problems surrounding these organized religions. This is why people say, well, no, you know what? I want to get to God my way. There's too much conflict within these organized religions. I'm gonna go to God choosing my own path. Right? So it's okay, forget about the prophets. I'm doing my own way. But as we know, in Islam, God has made an obligation to follow the prophets. What is the wisdom in following the prophets? Following the prophets.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. So, the idea of how can I say? The thing is, the complaints that people have raised about, let's say, quote unquote, organized religion, is not unique to organized religion. It's found everywhere, including their own lives that they live right now. It's just maybe there hasn't been the problems attached to it haven't been attached to it. Meaning, no one says, "Oh, I want to leave atheism because all it does is leave people because I'm unhappy, alone, unmarried, no children." And no one attributes those the outcome, which is clearly a result of modernity, to modernity. Yet people attribute things which is not even part of the religion, like you mentioned, abusing small choir boys. That's not a part of Catholic belief. Although some priests have, not some, I'll probably say a few, have been caught doing that. So you see, there's a bit of double standards here. And if anything, I would say it's more to do with just an excuse to do your own thing, because we, in modernity, Western culture, the idea of individualism has become widespread.
Yeah.
I would say that's the root of that whole argument. I want to be an individual. I don't want no one to tell me anything. I don't want to be given instruction. I want to figure it out on my own and do whatever I want to do. Disobedience. That actually, ironically, if you start really thinking about it, just contemplating deeply, just ask yourself a question: how many layers of disobedience do we have in our society? It's everywhere. I mean, if we've got to the stage where now a child is very disobedient to their parent, an employee is very disobedient to his employer. We have so many avenues of disobedience. Even the idea of protesting, which is my right to voice my opinions openly in a democratic fashion, that's actual disobedience. So they praise and celebrate disobedience. And I think this is where it comes from. That's why I think, and I'm happy to be corrected, but I speculate that those people who adhere to obedience, whatever that religion may be, are more inclined to accept Islam, because that element of Islam is not new to them. The idea of following instruction, whether you're a Christian or you're a Jew or even a Hindu or a Sikh. At some point they have instruction of what they can and can't do, and they follow that and they adhere to that, and they acknowledge at some level that there must be some form of guidance that transcends their limited lifespan and their limit.
I think you're cutting out. Oh, you're back now.
Just cut out there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back now. Yeah.
So whereas those who who are on this new religion of free for all, do what you like, blah blah blah, then they might find it that difficult. I mean, even ironically, I don't know if you've seen, there was a 3-hour debate between Daniel Haqiqatju and some other Murtad. And the Murtad got destroyed as usual. Anyway, so some of the atheists in their own arenas, platforms, expressed how their own champion got destroyed in the debate. And someone expressed specifically that their main issue with Islam was that they don't want to follow the instruction. They don't like these instructions that have been given to them. It wasn't even the ideas and the ideology and the oneness of God. All that stuff was fine for them. The idea of this being one God, whatnot, was actually not, especially after the debate. It wasn't that far-fetched in their minds, but it was just the issue of, I have to change my way and go to something else. And I think that stems from the ayah of the Quran. Allah mentions about the people of Quraysh, and says, "Inna wajadna aba'ana ala ummah." Verily, we found our forefathers on a particular way. وَإِنَّا عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ مُقْتَدُونَ. And verily, on their way, we take guidance. That has been the trope for mankind for centuries. I raised a certain way, I was brought up a certain way, and this is the way I'm going to be, and this is the way I'm going to die. The same thing my mama said to me. I was born a Christian, I'll die a Christian. That's it. So many people have said the same thing because it's just, why make the extra effort? Go on.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One, some people may say, well, those who choose to follow a prophet are in need to follow someone. It's a weakness to say, well, you need to follow someone. Me, I'm strong enough to do this independently. I'm strong enough to follow my own way. You people, you need to follow a prophet. You're a slave to this man. No, me, I'm going to make up my own way. I'm going to go to God directly. What about from that angle, that following a prophet is not a weakness? You get what I'm saying? Because they always say, well, okay, I'm independent, I'm free, I'm strong, I can make my own way, while you people have to follow this man in order to feel happiness.
Yeah. So that logic, I fully understand. And I share that logic in many things. So, for example, when I get new furniture from Ikea, the first thing I do is throw the instructions away because I want to figure it out myself.
No way.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah. No more. You can't do that. Come on, bro.
No, but that's what I do. That's what I do. I love to get the screws, organize them well, look at the holes, figure out, okay, this I have 4 screws here, there's 4 holes here. I love to figure out this thing has to be built. As long as I have the image at the end where it should look in the end, I try and get from the pieces to the end. And for me, that's my own little achievement. That's my own little achievement. And if at some point I just can't figure it out, then I get the instructions back in, and then I bite the bullet, you know, as they say, bite the bullet.
Okay, you bite your tongue, yes. You humble yourself. Humble yourself.
But and that's the word. That's the word, brother. That's the key word. And I humble myself. But if you try and take that approach of life, there's a problem. Number one, if I ruin my furniture, I've only ruined furniture. But if I ruin my life, I've ruined my life in this life and the next. And sometimes, and things in terms of our life and the hereafter, you only have one chance. Whereas if it comes to furniture, I mean, there's no end of chances. I mean, I could literally just buy another piece of furniture if it broke. So, I mean, I understand the psychology I understand psychology,
Mm-hmm.
but the risks are just too high, number one. And
Mm.
secondly, even if a person, I mean, even I reminds me of the quote of Imam Ahmed, that if a person tries to figure out the Sunnah with his intellect, he is sinful, even if he achieves it.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that if he figured out that brushing your teeth with siwak is Sunnah on his own accord, and he brushed his teeth because of that, figuring it out himself, that's still sinful. Not because he did the wrong thing, because he did the right thing actually, but because he got there the wrong way. And this is what life is different. Allah's not just giving us instruction and said, look, here's the best way to live your life. You can choose to do so if you want to, or you can just figure it out yourself. Allah never gave us that choice. Like Ikea. Ikea, they give you instructions, but they don't say if you don't use the instructions, we're going to come and mash up your building. There's no punishment for not using the instruction. So with life, we've got one opportunity to get it right, and you've been given clear instruction. And those who say I can figure it out on my own, that is counter to the premise. It's not just about doing the right thing; it's about following the instructions as well. As in, there's two parts: being a good person and doing so because you're instructed to do so. There's two elements. That's why a non-Muslim could be charitable and a good, quote unquote, good person, but still get to hellfire because he did so via the incorrect means. So there's two elements there. But I guess in that sense, I would probably ask that person who says this question, I could figure out my own, I'll probably ask them a counter question. And a counter question is, so do you accept then that the creator of the heavens and the earth gave instruction? Because if they haven't accepted that premise, then the second part is irrelevant. They might say, I don't need to follow instruction, fair enough. But do you admit that these instructions are from God? Because if you say, yeah, I agree that they are from God, I'm not going to follow them, then you're just disobedient, aren't you? And the hellfire is for the disobedient.
But you know what they're going to say, which I've heard before, is Prophet Muhammad came for the Arabs. He didn't come for the black people. He didn't come for the Chinese people. He came for the Arabs. Or, for example, they might say, which I heard the other day, the reason I'm not going to follow Islam is because those Arabs enslaved us. So there are certain racial motives not to follow the Arab prophet because he's Arab, and things that have happened in the past. Even if you go back probably to Pharaoh and the people of Musa, they didn't want to follow. People of Pharaoh didn't want to follow Musa, okay, because they were Bani Israel. There's always some kind of racial element, or the fact that maybe another group of people say we're not following them, we're following, as you said, our forefathers. How must a person see through these barriers in order to get to the truth and say, you know what, irrespective of where the prophet is from, I have to follow him? How can we say you must see through that smoke and cloud and say, you know what, now I'm obligated to follow this prophet?
Well, there's two parts of it. The first part would be for them to first recognize that the purpose of guidance isn't just to direct action, it is to refine character and belief. So it's not just about, you can make up nonsense about it's the Prophet Muhammad is Arab and I'm not Arab and all sorts of historical things, but we have to acknowledge that Islam came to refine character and remove wasakh, remove dirt from our being, not our actions, but from our being. And the second part would be that one of the biggest pieces of wasakh or dirt to be removed from our being is qawmiyah, is this allegiances on false lines or believing in false narratives. So, for example, he's Arab, I'm black. That means nothing. I mean, it's just like the other day. I remember someone said, "Oh, so and so person who invented so and so, he was black," and I said to the person, "So, I mean, was he tall? Was he short? I mean, there's so many things about him that had nothing to do with his invention, and the amount of melanin in his skin had nothing to do with his invention. Maybe to do with it was his upbringing, his background, his mother might have influenced him. There's so many things that would have led to him achieving what he achieved, but none of that had to do with how large his nose was or how short he cut his hair. These things are irrelevant things, and it's a false flag. It's a false flag. Now, we live in, the thing is, what's ironic about, especially the black community, and what's ironic about the black community is that the black community seeks to distance themselves from those who put them in their situation in the first place, i.e. the colonial powers of the past. They took them from Africa, took them to America, used them as slave labor, then emancipated them in a manner which left them destitute and poor and so on and so forth, and then continued to suppress them for generations onwards. So those people who essentially, historically, and because I'm not talking about those of today, historically, those who did that in the past, they seek to distance themselves from them and what they've done, but they don't seem to realize that they need to distance themselves even in the way they think and the way they behave. I mean, just as an example, this is actually funny because I had someone replied on my YouTube video about this very topic with the same nonsense. He said, "Oh, Yusuf wasn't black." Alayhi salam. Yusuf alayhi salam, yeah, wasn't black, and Musa alayhi salam wasn't black. They were Semites, and I laughed because I thought, what a stupid thing to say. Why is it stupid? Because a Semite is a lineage, is a tribe. It has zero to do with skin color. Whereas black is supposed to be a skin color. It has nothing to do with tribe. I mean, a black person, what tribe are they from? If that would be a stupid question to ask, what tribe are black men from? That's not, so it's like you can't compare the things. So you can't now want to distance yourself from those people, but yet still use their language, i.e. black and white. I mean, you've defined your world in their language, in their frame. You framed yourself in their language. But yet you seek to distance yourself from that language. But back to the point anyway. So unfortunately, many people from the black community, or more accurately, from the Caribbean community, or the African American community, or even the African community, they seek to distance themselves. Also, they seek to say, "Oh, this is from those people, and we are from our people."
I will just add, I presume, even if you have Westerners or white people, they might find it difficult to follow Islam because he's seen as Arab. But when you find that Jesus is painted as white, blonde hair, blue eyes, it seems easier to become a Christian. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I mean, even
again,
from a Western point of view, it's probably hard to. I'm not following these Arabs. You get what I'm saying? Oh, rather, even though Isa alayhi salam was probably Semitic anyway. So,
but the thing is that this whole qawmiya, the reason why Islam came to remove this qawmiya, or this nationalism, or this asabiya, or this, you could say, racism and whatnot, is because the root of it is arrogance. The root of it is arrogance and claiming what is not yours. Okay, I was born in England. My family generations, I'll go back to quote unquote an Englishman's heritage. Therefore, we are not anything. Whoever achieved what they achieved in the past, they did it, not you. You can't claim to fame what other people have done. You will stand in front of Allah alone, naked, and answer for what you did. You can't answer. You don't answer for what other people have achieved. So the point is, the solution for them, as in whoever says I don't need Islam because that came into the Arabs, that's even more reason why they need Islam, because they have a sickness that they've just uttered on their tongue. The sickness of qawmiya, of asabiya, of associating oneself with. I mean, look at the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Medina. That was a cosmopolitan of mainly Arabs, obviously, but we had Persians, we had Ethiopians, we had all sorts of people come from all over the place. Rome, we had all sorts of people come from, and they weren't ostracized and cast out. They actually were elevated by the Messenger of Allah himself. Bilal was the mu'adhin, who hasn't given a high station of the one calling people to salah, getting a reward of every person who now got the salah in jama'ah because they were reminded by his adhan. We have the one
MashaAllah.
who we have Salman al-Farisi, who was marked in history, etched in the granite of history for taking his advice about the Khandaq, about the trench.
Mm.
It was none of this nonsense. Oh, well, you're Persian, so we don't do what Persian people do. We do what Arabs do. None of that nonsense. It was your merit comes from what you contribute and what you do in bettering your character and following Islamic teachings. This is your measure of what. This is how you become, quote unquote, a high value man. You become a
Yeah.
good individual by following Islamic teachings and elevating yourself in character and in character primarily, which manifests itself in action. This is how you become a better person. So when someone says, I don't need to be Muslim because they went to Arabs, what they're saying to themselves is, I am better than him. I made from fire, he made from clay. That's what they're saying. The same statement of Iblis, which means they need Islam even more. Because otherwise they're still following Iblis. You know, it's actually ironic. A lot of this modernity, you can actually trace the root of modernity back to the actual doctrine of Iblis. I'm not talking about doctrine of Christianity and Judaism and all those sorts. I'm saying literally the ideology of Iblis himself. You can trace a lot of modernity down to that one. So even the issue of Arabs and I mean, who cares what an Arab did? The Arabs never invented Islam. Islam came from Allah. And at some point, Allah had to choose someone to carry the message.
Yeah, I mean, this is the key point, that if someone believes in God, then it's about obedience. You don't have a choice. So if Allah sends a prophet from whatever corner of the land, yeah, it's about obedience. But people obviously they're clouded by qawmiyya, as you said, racism, politics, history, what's happened in the past.
Stubbornness.
Stubbornness. So it then goes back to the point of, do you really want to worship God? Is that what you really want to do? Because if you really want to worship God, then you're going to submit, and then you're going to.
You know, funny thing is, for some people, what causes? I mean, I'll probably say every person, but what causes a person to want to follow Islam and accept Islam in the end is when and if they have that moment in their life when they recognize their own weaknesses. So you had the classic trope, the classic scenario: a person is on, he's on the boat in the middle of nowhere. There's a storm. He's worried he's gonna be capsized, and the boat's capsized. He's gonna drown, and he sincerely calls to Allah. And then when he's in safety, he returns back to shirk, as Allah mentioned in the Quran as an example, which we all have examples of. There's even many rebirths who've had tragic events in their life which led them to seek out God, which led them to Islam. But if you try and understand the psychology, the connection between this tragic event and Iman, is because this tragic event woke that person up to make them realize their own weaknesses as an individual. They are weak. They can't do anything. Their child, their mother, their wife, their husband, whoever is laid down in front of them, dying of cancer, of COVID, or whatever the case may be, and they can do nothing about it. That reality sometimes is enough to awaken them to their reality. Whereas when they're calm and they got their Bentley, they got their nice house, and they got their villa, and they've got a good job, they've got good income, they're not aware of their weaknesses. They feel quite strong.
Yes.
Like Fir'aun says, "Oh, the rivers follow beneath my feet." I mean, he feels quite strong. It was only when Fir'aun was being drowned, when the water was going in through his nostrils and his mouth, and at that moment he says, "I believe in the one that I believe in the Lord of Musa and Harun." At that moment, when he recognized his his inability, which is still too late for him, which is still too late for him. But even the highest person, Fir'aun, there was a level that he recognized openly, although for him it was too late. But the point is the same scenario. This issue comes from arrogance, and it comes from a feeling of safety. That's what Allah always reminds us. Don't feel too safe in how you are. Allah can easily cause the clouds to cluster, lightning come and knock you on your head. That's it. Or I can easily make a nice flat earth open up and suck you inside. Don't feel too safe from the adhab of Allah. And that recognition of Allah's punishment, the reality of his punishment, and the reality of death even. I mean, as Messenger of Allah said, increase in the remembrance in the destroyer of pleasure, as an increase in the remembrance of death. Because when you increase the remembrance of death, it reminds you of your weakness, your inherent weakness, that not even, you can avoid many things. You can avoid a taxman, you can avoid being mugged, you can avoid lots of things in life, but you can't avoid death. That's your weakness. That's the weakness of all of us. And this is why those kind of people we say, oh, what Ashraf are Arabs, you need to now remind them of that weakness. Okay, you want to follow, you want to do your own thing, but don't you recognize how weak you are as an individual? You say you can guide yourself, but how possibly could you guide yourself? You've never experienced your future. You haven't experienced anything. I mean, even especially for those people out there who have children who have now reached the age of teenager, especially the second half of being a teenager, like their late teens. And we know how they behave, like they know everything. You know what I'm talking about, innit?
I know exactly, brother.
How they behave, like they know everything. And you look at them and think to yourself, oh, you just don't know.
You don't.
You think you know about life? You've literally come out of school a couple of weeks ago. You've literally never paid a bill in your life, but yet you know everything. Explain that to me.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. Why would a person, even if he's in his 40s or his 50s, you think you know everything? You know a lot, but you don't know what comes after death. No one has died, experienced death, gone to the next life, and then come back and say, yeah, I know what it's like. You know, this is it. No one's done that. The closest we have to it is the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, who was given direct revelation as to what will happen. That's the only experience. That's the key. That's the only experience we have of what comes next. Prophethood.
Okay, can we look at the point of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, his role as a messenger in regards to showing how to worship Allah, how to communicate with Allah, and also make a distinction between this worship and your cultural practices? Because some people may think, well, okay, if I'm following Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, I've got to become an Arab. When really Prophet Muhammad's role is to make you focus on worshipping your God, not necessarily what food you have to eat, what clothes you have to wear, how you have to speak. Obviously, he deals with manners, etiquettes, and manners. But as one man said, Islam didn't come to change your culture. It just came to tell you how to worship Allah, how to connect with your God, and how to get to paradise. So if you can just make a distinction between the role of the Prophet ﷺ, that is actually distinct from changing your cultural practices, obviously, unless they go against Islam.
Yes, I mean, like the phrase you just mentioned now about Islam came to, not change your culture. I would actually say Islam came to refine one's culture. And what you find is that, especially if anyone like that who has those concerns, just look at Islam throughout the world. Islam spans all the way from China to Morocco and beyond. And wherever Islam has gone, you find the masajid are built differently, the clothing of the Muslims are different, the food is different. They're not all Arabs, all wearing the same thobe, all wearing a shimar and the iqal. They all dress in accordance to the Muslims of that area, i.e. they all have their own local culture. And this is what's beautiful about Islam. Islam doesn't come to homogenize and make everyone exactly the same in food, eating, everything like that. It's not the case. We even see that Messenger of Allah where someone was eating lizard, dhab, and he refused, but made it clear that it's just because he didn't like it. It's not that Islam is against it. So you can eat your dhab, you can eat your lizard, but you don't have to force me to eat your lizard. So that's very, very, very important, which is different from a lot of modernity, which seeks to homogenize people, make everyone the same. Everyone wants to be and speak American and dress like American and all listen to rap. This seems to be not openly a da'wah or not openly a call to that, what seems to be the byproduct of it. But as Islam says, look, stay as you want to stay, be as you want to be. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you follow the basic tenets of Islam, the basic elements of Islam. So that's so if a person has that issue, maybe they have certain traditions that they have. As long as those traditions are not religious traditions, which I don't think anyone would object to if they use their intellect. Of course, if you accept Islam, you're not going to still continue celebrating non-Muslim celebrations, of course. But then you have what's it called? Certain things that you may do as a culture, you can still keep. But the only issue Islam takes with is with how your external can influence your internal. So if it is something which is uniquely distinct to the kuffar, then we say abstain from that, because that now comes a part of what's the word? There's a word that they use
resembling or
yeah, it is resembling. There's a word they use, because I remember there was during Tony Blair there was the whole multiculturalism, and then after him they did the opposite, the U-turn, and they called it something else.
Not assimilation.
Assimilation like that, yes. I'm a bit like assimilation, but yeah. The point is, if you start assimilating and start emulating non-Muslims in their behavior and dress and whatnot, then that leads to emulating them in their behavior. And like I said, Islam has very, very clear guidelines of what is unacceptable in terms of behavior. So it becomes like almost like a blanket recommendation for especially a new Muslim, that at some level you're gonna have to refine yourself. And I think unfortunately, that's one thing that many new Muslims and even those who are born in Islam haven't fully internalized themselves yet. They think that being a better Muslim are doing the external things, the dress and whatnot, and the fast and whatnot, not realizing that actually there's a lot more work to be done in refining one's character. So, for example, some people might behave a certain way, normal in their culture, but Islam encourages something else. So you're gonna have to make effort to go against your nafs, go against what you normally do, and do what is best according to Islam. So that's just, you know, what Islam recommends. Which is why, again, I keep banging on about it every week. Why hijrah is important, because hijrah, or being in an environment of Muslims, the better the environment, or the closer the cultural environment is to Islam, the easier it will be to assimilate and to just be normal. It's hard to adopt Islamic values and behaviors and structures in a society that is devoid of that. Even the simple thing of being charitable and inviting people to your home to feed them and whatnot. If that's not in your culture and everyone's very standoffish, it's hard to be opposite.
To break that, yeah.
To break that. I mean, even when I was in Saudi, almost every single time I would leave my house, and this is probably exaggeration, there's always some Saudi or Arab saying, "Tafaddal, come have some food or whatnot, come to my house and eat." And I'm like, I just want to go home, because that's how I was raised. You go out, you come in, you just keep to yourself. You don't socialize like that. I mean, not everyone, but I'm just saying that's how I was. I had to make actual physical, mental effort to start saying, "Okay, Father, let's do it. Let's spend some time and chat and socialize and see how we are to be brothers in Islam."
Can we look at a very important point, that the shahada? So someone who wants to become Muslims, there's two parts of the shahada. Obviously, first part, none has the right to be worshipped except Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. That this cannot be separated. You cannot have one. You can't just say, "I believe in God alone." You have to have Muhammad Rasulullah. What does that mean for the person who's thinking of becoming Muslim, and the person who is Muslim? What does that statement mean, and how can you negate that statement?
Yeah, so there's a lot of focus on accepting that, acknowledging that there's none worthy of worship besides Allah. We get that. But the question now would be, if one is honest themselves and contemplates the meaning of the shahada, none is worthy of worship but Allah. So the first question one should ask themselves once they acknowledge that is, how do I do that? If no one is worthy of worship but Allah, how do I fulfill that task of actually worshipping none but Allah? And that's where Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, being a messenger of Allah, fulfills that task. So we almost say that the first part of the shahada is the bedrock. This is what you need to be to get to Jannah. And the second part of it is, you could say, the manual. How do you achieve the first part? There's no way you can achieve the first part without achieving and doing the second part, which is acknowledging that he's messenger of Allah. And if you acknowledge that he's messenger of Allah, that entails acknowledging that there was a message given to him for the purpose of giving it to you. So how can you say, I worship Allah and I believe in Allah and I accept what Allah teaches us, but at the same breath, I say, I don't want to hear what Allah has to say to me. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It's like saying, yeah, I love my mum, I appreciate my mum, I respect my mum, but any letters I get from her, I want to throw in a bin. I don't want to hear it. That's an oxymoron. No one will accept that as making sense. Why don't you want to hear what your mum has to say to you? What she's saying to you? That makes no sense. So that's the important part of the shahada. It is a direct instruction, or you could say it's a condition for acknowledgement that there is a list of instructions, guidance, recommendations given to us by Allah through an individual. Through an individual. I mean, Muslims, we're not like some Christian denominations that believe that everyone can get direct message from Allah and guidance from Allah direct. No. I mean, I remember one time when my mom got really into Christianity, she mentioned that in her church, they get messages from, people can get messages from God.
Oh, speaking tongues or something? Oh, okay.
No, more than that, through dreams. So you can get messages, like, for example, you might get a dream to do this and a dream to do that. So I thought, when I was young, I was very, very direct. So I said to my mom, so what happens when you get two people who have two different dreams? One says go left, one says go right. I thought I might catch her out, innit? I thought I might catch her out. Because at the end of the day, again, they are using a means of guidance which is subjective, to say the least. I mean, I got a dream to do X, Y, Z. Yeah, but why can't it just be a normal dream? I mean, even Islam acknowledges that some dreams carry meaning, but some dreams carry no meaning. And all dreams can never replace the Sharia. Dream, and the best a dream could do is give glad tidings. That's it. It doesn't give instruction. There's no dreams that says marry this woman or don't marry this woman. No, the best thing to say is glad tidings of Jannah, glad tidings of a good life. That's about it. Anyway, she says to me, oh, well, what we do is that if two people have one dream and one guy has another dream, then we take the two. I'm like, I was like, oh, come on, mom. So what happened to the one guy then? His dreams means nothing then. I mean, I thought his dreams means something, but now it means nothing. Anyway, the point is guidance has to be clear and defined. And that's one of the things that really drew me to Islam when I was looking into Islam before I became Muslim, was that it was clear. As a Christian, it wasn't clear. What exactly should one do or not do? It's not clear. Even their teachings. Sometimes a lot of it is metaphor. A lot of it is, a stretch of the language. It's a lot of it. It's broad. I mean, I'll give one example. I mentioned this many times. When I first became Muslim, there was in my college, there was the word spread that this guy has left Christianity. Some of the Christians came to me to ask why and to bring me back to Christ. Bring me back to Christ. Yeah. So one girl came to me, said to me, out of the blue, you know Abraham? I said, yeah, not Abraham. Of course not Abraham. Everyone knows Abraham. Do you know the sheep that he sacrificed instead of his son? I said, yeah. So do you know who that sheep was? Now at that point, I was like really interested. What? Who the sheep was? I don't know. It's a sheep, and I don't know their ins and outs. It's a sheep. It's a sheep.
Yeah.
Because it was Jesus.
Oh gosh.
So I'm sat there thinking,
how? How does he get to that?
Have you lost it? Have you lost it? I'm like, I said to her, look, you know, there's like hundreds of years and thousands of years between Abraham and Jesus.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but because you don't have the spirit, you don't know. Now,
Okay.
again, I understand where she's coming from. Actually, I get where she's coming from. I mean, can you guess where she got the idea from?
I ain't got a clue, brother. I ain't got
Because
a clue.
Jesus is described as being a lamb,
Okay.
and he sacrificed a lamb.
That lamb. Okay.
So Jesus is a lamb. He sacrificed a lamb. Boom, interpretation.
Oh,
And then
horrible. Horrible.
sprinkling some of the Holy Spirit. That's it, bro. You got a doctrine. You got an idea. So, because of that, now it's very obvious to any Christian. Well, maybe not, maybe obvious to a Christian, because if you're in that world, then it's hard to see. But for any Muslim looking into Christianity, you'd see that a vast majority of their beliefs is ambiguous. It's not clear. Islam is very different. I mean, Isa alayhi salam, in some interpretations 3 years, some interpretations 1 year, but his mission was not long. And what he's taught wasn't well recorded. And even if it was well recorded at his time, a lot of it didn't last. So his da'wah was very limited to those around him at the time. The Messenger of Allah, on the other hand, we had 23 years. 23 years. If I think about it, I've actually been Muslim about 22 years, near to 23. So that means the entire lifespan of me being a Muslim is still less than the time that he was Messenger of Allah, teaching Islam and delivering revelation. And even to me, that's a long time. My oldest child is now in university, and their whole from the time they were born until now is still less than the time he was given guidance. That's a whole lifetime for some people. And in top of all of that guidance he was given, he established nations. Well, not nations, but established a nation of people. All of them absorbing this guidance, memorizing this guidance, and conveying it to the world. So why would you? I mean, there's never been a person in the history of mankind. This is something which is a fact. This is not something. This is not doctrine. This is not ideology. This is a fact. There's not a person in the history of mankind that has had his life so well documented as the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
So
never.
What is then the for the audience or any non-Muslims that may be looking, what is then the practical way that we follow the Prophet? Obviously, we say that his life has been documented in a hadith, and we have those books. So what is the way? Someone says, okay, I believe in God. I want to know worship him. What is then the next step for that individual? How is it practically that a Muslim follows Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Well, I mean, think about it. 23 years, brother. One individual receiving revelation for 23 years amongst a people of hundreds and thousands of people at the time Messenger of Allah was also living the revelation, living guidance through that time period and recording that thing. So the question now is, what possible scenario in your life never occurred then that you can't draw some lesson from, guidance from, teaching from? Disobedient children, covered. Disobedient wives, covered. Obnoxious husbands, covered. I mean, tax collectors, covered.
Transactions, covered.
Transactions,
business,
covered.
War, everything.
War, covered. Peace, covered.
Looking after an orphan, covered. Yeah.
Hypocrisy. I mean, what possible part of our lives is not contained in their lives? And on top of that, not even just their lives, the lives of the first 3 generations. Them, the Sahaba's students, and their students. What possible thing can we say doesn't exist? And this is before anyone says, oh, but we have technology, things are different. Actually, I think it would be very difficult to find a scenario today, even with our technology, that is actually unique. That's actually unique, that never existed. Even, for example, let me give you one thing that some might say, might catch me out. How about inflation? Did they have inflation back then? They did actually. They did. The Sahaba came to Messenger of Allah and said that everything's more expensive. Set the prices. So they actually had inflation. They actually discussed setting prices, having price regulations. They actually had that discussion. So, what possible scenario can you think of that you can't draw from their lives? And if that's the case, why would you choose a guidance other than their guidance? Why would you do that? Even the most common thing now, for example, this whole trans identity, blah, blah business, which is prevalent. Everyone thinks it's such a new thing. Actually, there were effeminate men then at the time, Mr. Allah, as well.
Yes.
They existed. They were part of society, and guidance was given in relation to them. Specifically, for example, there was one individual who was a very, very effeminate, who used to frequent the women's majalis or sit-ins. It's obviously earlier on. And he said to Messenger of Allah, "O Messenger of Allah," and we assume from that statement that he was a Muslim as well. If you go to conquer Khaybar, a village in Khaybar, I will show you a woman who comes with 4 and goes with 8. And the interpretation of that means that she's voluptuous and she's beautiful, because the 4 refers to rows of fat, and the 8 refers to 8 rows of fat from either side. Basically, she's meaty, and at their time, meaty woman, a woman with cellulite, you could say, was taken as being attractive and beautiful. And when the Messenger of Allah heard him say that, he banned men like that from frequenting majalis of women like that, because what they were doing is they were being a conduit, taking information from one side and giving it to the other side, taking knowledge from the women's, or what they talk about, and take it to the men, and take it to men, and causing fitna.
He got banned, yeah.
He got banned. But again, so that on that, so in saying that, then imagine someone says to you, "Oh, but what happens if a trans woman comes into a woman's section? A man who was born a man who now transitions to being a woman wants to go and pray in a woman's section. What do we do?" No,
Jews can't go,
because we have an example of that, and that was prohibited.
Yes.
So again, I mean, so the question is, so it brings back to let's bring the whole thing back to the beginning of the conversation. The statement is, why should I follow the Prophet Muhammad when I can just do my own thing? Because every scenario you could possibly have in your life, you'd find an example there. And for you to refuse that example is a sign of arrogance you still need to remove. You still have arrogance in your nafs, you need to purify and get rid of. You need to humble yourself. You need to humble yourself. Why would you do that? It's just like a child. I mean, again, those who are teenagers will know this. If you have a teenage child and you tell them, "Don't do X, Y, Z because I am older, I have more experience, I know more than you," and they say, "No, I'll figure it out." That's the same attitude. The same way you as a parent roll your eyes and say, "Okay, whatever." The same way we roll our eyes at those people, say you don't need the guidance of Mr. Allah. We say, "Okay, whatever. Do what you're doing then, and see how far you go."
But there's obviously the issue is that in reality they don't have a choice. If they say they believe in Allah, then they have to follow the messenger, because Allah has made it obligatory upon them to follow the messenger. But now we have some people called Quraniyun who basically they reject the hadith. But that's another story altogether. We're just talking about people who want to worship God, want to draw closer to Him. The fact that they must understand that following the mission of Allah is an obligation which you can't avoid. So this history that you spoke about was written down, memorized. How does then a person implement this? Where does he start from? What are the most important things? What's a practical way that a Muslim follows a prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Step by step. That's literally what it is. I know a lot of people who embrace Islam newly. They have the zeal to swallow the whole ocean in one gulp. But reality is is that such change takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Such change takes time. And that's why they need to focus on the most important things, and then the important things. The most important things, and then the important things. So, the most important thing for a person will be the prayer, the 5 obligatory things, the things that you need to have in order to be a Muslim. Pray 5 times a day, fast in Ramadan, doing the Hajj if you have the money, giving the zakah when you have money to give zakah. These are the things one needs to establish immediately. And along the way, we can establish the other smaller things gradually, as much as one is able. So, as the hadith of Mr. Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ma nahaytukum anhu fajtanibuh." What I have forbidden you from, stay away from it entirely. وَمَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِهِ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. What I have ordered you to do, though, do as much of it as you are able. So abstaining from prohibitions is easy. It's just the act of just not doing. I find it hard to imagine someone is actually compelled to commit sin. Not really. Sin is something you do, you struggle with emotionally, but all you have to do is just stop. But sins that is but things that you've been ordered to do, that requires now actual effort to do a physical act. Hence why the hadith said, whatever you are able to do. Do whatever you are able to do. So, like I said, for a new revert Muslim, it would be the obligatory salah. And finally, to refine themselves, or at least acknowledge in their head, you need refinement. You need refinement in behavior and character, and then they should focus themselves on those types of lessons. Lessons on building good character, generosity, forbearance, patience, gratitude. These things, which are internal acts, by the way, internal acts of worship, need to be worked on consistently, constantly, in order for it to become part of their being as they move forward. It's very, very, very important. Because without that, nothing else can be sustained. Like I said, some people, they work so hard on the external things, but inside it's still rotten. Inside, it's still rotten. Because they never made any effort to remove that. They've still got the same problems inside. Arrogance, obnoxiousness, lack of patience. Not willing to make any effort whatsoever. Whereas if you start studying the lives of the companions, the Sahaba, and even those before the Sahaba, like previous nations, you see many examples of how we need to be. Just one example, and we can close with that one. Yusuf alayhi salam, sold into slavery by his brothers. Yet when he saw his brothers, he forgave them. How many of us can say that we could do that? That we could forgive the transgressions of our families when we were younger. How many times I've heard of so-and-so say, "Oh, I don't like my dad," or "I don't like my mom because when I was young, they did X, Y, Z." And I think to myself, did they do worse than what the brothers of Yusuf did?
But you know what? I remember some shit was speaking about the father. What's father name? Azar? What's Yusuf?
Of who? Of Abraham?
Oh no, Yusuf alayhi salam. His father. What was his name?
Yaqub, yeah.
Yaqub. So even though he knew there was treachery from his sons, he didn't banish them from the house. He was patient. And then obviously at the end of the story, did those sons become prophets after some kalam? Did the brothers of Yusuf did they become prophets afterwards? Like they became righteous afterwards. But for us,
I know some Taymiyyah says that they didn't. But the point is, even if they didn't become prophets, they weren't banished, they weren't executed, they weren't. There was still forgiveness. And I'm saying that just as that one example, forgiveness of your siblings, forgiveness of your family members. I've literally had that discussion with many people. Say, I don't like my dad. Why not? Because X, Y, Z happened when I was young. Okay, but that was when you were young. That's not now. It's still your dad. and you got to fix things. Maybe he's changed. Maybe over the years he feels regret. Maybe what you think happened actually never happened, and that's a very common one. I'm sure parents will know this. How many times have our children had beef that was old? But when you think about it, wait, that's not how it went down. That's not how it went down.
You've seen it,
but in their head, that's how it went down. They saw it that way, but that's not how it went down. That's why even the other day I saw one. It was not Muslim, but he mentioned to someone on this discussion. He said, "Don't get yourself involved in your parents' business because you're not in their situation, and you are a child. A child can't understand what their parents are going through. So don't get yourself involved in the situation." The point is, put all that aside. The point is, there is so much we can gain from the lives of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu and his companions, and those nations before us that Allah has told us about them for the purpose of guidance. I mean, look at the fact that the Sharia. We're talking about the idea of guidance. Yeah, we're talking about the idea of guidance. I don't want to follow the Prophet Muhammad's Sharia law. I don't want to follow Sharia law. But more than 75% of the Quran is stories of the past and Tawheed. A very few, a little bit of the Quran, a tiny piece of the slither of the Quran is rules and regulations. The majority of it is moral guidance, character building guidance.
So, hellfire, paradise.
Hellfire, paradise, encouragement here. So when we say follow the Sharia, follow Islam, we're talking about essentially refining your character that manifests itself in the best possible light. And on the off chance that the world doesn't work out the way you should, we have a guideline of how to resolve those issues. That's basically it, really. That's basically the situation. So yeah, humbleness is very key for that individual who has that problem.
A quick explanation of, as I said, a hadith, that this history has come to us via hadith. What is a hadith? And in Islam, why is a hadith, you could say, part of the Sharia? Why is it an obligation? We could just do that briefly in the last 3 minutes and then we'll close there.
Cool. So the Islam came with guidance and revelation. And the revelation that came to us from Allah was either direct in terms... Are you still there?
Yes, yeah, I'm here.
Either came to us direct in terms of the speech of Allah, what Allah told us directly, the Quran, and we have been ordered to recite that speech in our prayers, in our salah. So that's the Quran. But there are other instruction and guidance given to us by Allah that we haven't been ordered to recite in the salah. So this is what people need to understand, is that when Allah gave us guidance, it wasn't just only what we recite in the Quran, in the salah. It's other forms of guidance. There's even hadith Qudsi, there's even other hadith Qudsi, which is basically, again, Allah's speech, Allah giving us instruction, talking to us, guiding us, but we don't recite it in our salah. We don't recite it in our salah. That's still the speech of Allah. It's still guidance from Allah. It's just not inside the Quran. So if we acknowledge that there is guidance outside of only what was recited in the Quran, then the question is, okay, what does that guidance look like? Basically, it looks like a template of guidance, a template of how we should live our lives. Basically, a template. So these companions, they had scenarios, situations. They went to the Messenger of Allah. They asked him questions. Oh, Messenger of Allah, if this happened, what should I do? Do this. Are we going to now say, well, whatever the Messenger of Allah says, I'm going to ignore and we'll just do my own thing? Why does that make sense? Why would you, who's in the same situation as this question being asked of this companion, do other than what he said? And why would you even imagine that what the Messenger of Allah guided them to was not what was inside the Quran, or was not the manifestation of the Quran in reality? Why would anyone assume that? So essentially, back to answering your question, the Quran is only what was instructed to us to recite in the salah.
You recited.
But that was not the only revelation. It's not the only revelation that was given to us. The other revelation that was given to us by Allah, which ironically is actually the only revelation that the Christians and the Jews have. If you look at their Bible, that's all they have. Scenarios and situations and events that happen. So essentially, our Sunnah is equivalent to their Bible, whereas our Quran actually transcends their Bible. It actually goes more than that, because they actually don't have a direct recitation from Allah to recite in their salah. They don't have that. We have that.
Alhamdulillah.
So even on that one, ironically, there is nothing like the Quran. As in, the Bible, there's nothing comparable. It just doesn't exist. There is nothing that can be claimed to be the exact word, verbatim, letter for letter, word for word, from Allah or from the Creator of the heavens and the earth, with the instruction recited in our prayers. That doesn't exist other than the Quran.
There's a question that comes to mind, but I'm not going to ask it. Is, why does our revelation negate the revelations before? But that's another topic for another day.
Inshallah.
For next time, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan, Shaykh Muawiyah, for your time. Once again, it's been Mufid, Jaddan, it's been very beneficial. Inshallah, we'll catch you next week, same time, inshallah, on the Muslim podcast. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.